In the days of yore, poor filmmaking and the horror genre used to be almost synonymous. And while that might not be as true today, sometimes there are still horror flicks so bad, so downright awful and unwatchable, that even the cinemas, distributors and production companies agree that they ought not to stay in theaters for a second longer than necessary. With that in mind, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 horror movies so awful they were pulled from cinemas. Number 8, Dashcam. Rob Savage's found footage horror Dashcam flew under the radar for most viewers, despite its decent reception at the 2021 Toronto International Film Festival. Dashcam is about Annie, a right-wing edgelord who live streams improvisational music from her car. She travels from America to UK to circumvent COVID restrictions, meets up with and torments a former bandmate before stealing his car and reluctantly agreeing to help out an ill woman called Angela, a passenger who soon gets our heroes in a deadly spot of bother. Despite its inventive format, Dashcam failed to catch on in the same way that the director's previous movie, Host, did. It is admittedly a big ask to get viewers to follow such a reprehensible main character, even in this genre, and combined with generally poor reviews, the film failed to find an audience. It didn't last long in the film houses then, and View Cinemas in the UK quickly pulled the film from their schedule, leading to a Twitter spat between director Savage and the company. Savage claimed that they pulled the movie because it was just too edgy for them and too offensive, to which View responded essentially saying, no, it just wasn't making any money, and it wasn't worth keeping screenings on. Number 7, The Conjuring 2. Now, before we get into this, I want to stress that I don't think The Conjuring 2 was a bad film. In fact, I've gone on record many times talking about how much I loved both it and the original. Unfortunately though, not everyone shares my opinion, and the film didn't play as well with audiences in every country that it debuted in. For instance, while the Conjuring series may have been a smash hit with UK and American audiences, French audiences have consistently given these films a perplexingly aggressive reception, including cinema audiences rioting at Annabelle in 2014. The Conjuring 2 sees the return of the fictionalized versions of real-life paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, who come out of retirement for one last job. Well, kinda. They travel to North London and meet Peggy Hodgson, a single mother of 4 who has been experiencing something evil in their home. Malignant spirits make themselves known and possessions are soon underway. You know the crack by now. The Conjuring 2, however, sparked an audience reaction of general ridicule and mayhem in France, with early reports of excessive laughter, hysterical yelling, and screen-wide brawls. This then led to the film being banned by the majority of the 262 French cinemas that were going to show it, with some removing it shortly after release, some pulling it on release day, and many just opting to not screen it at all. Number 6, Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City is not your parents' Resident Evil. It has no Milla Jovovich, it has no Paul W.S. Anderson, a slimmer production budget than the original or any of its sequels, and no ties to the canon of those flicks. But in the run-up to release, many thought that would be a good thing. I mean, maybe this movie could have finally done the video games justice. Well, of course it didn't, because this is live-action Resident Evil we're talking about. As such, the film bombed on release, causing certain cinemas in the UK to pull it outright, including industry giant Odeon. Despite the chain screening previews for the return to Raccoon City, none of their 120 UK cinemas actually ended up showing it when it did release wide. Though the only official line from the company was that they couldn't reach an agreement with the distributor Sony, the film's critical rating and lack of box office potential probably meant that Odeon would have been seeking to show it on a limited run, rather than a full theatrical release that Sony would have wanted. And this isn't the first time Odeon have gone head-to-head with distributors over specific titles, as they previously refused to show the new Fast and Furious in its post-lockdown release, in protest of Universal's decision to take the film to VOD early. Number 5, Cabin Fever 2016. Requels, remakes, and reboots are the bread and butter of modern cinema, which is probably only a decade or two away from going full Ouroboros and remaking its remakes and curb-stomping creativity and artistic credibility for good. And this can go doubly so for horror films, as some writers, directors, and producers love nothing more than to dig up an old intellectual property and go to town on it in whatever way they think will make the most money. Cabin Fever is one such example. Eli Roth's 2002 debut was not exactly beloved by horror audiences, but it received a generally positive reception and gave Roth enough credibility to forge ahead with a career making only films that a mother, or Quentin Tarantino, could love. Production designer Travis Z remade Cabin Fever in 2016, following the exact same plot of a group of young people fighting off a flesh-eating virus in a remote cabin in an almost shot-for-shot remake. Despite being so close to the original though, the flick was just outright awful. Critics revolted and its theatrical run was cut short, only showing at 22 cinemas in the UK and 51 in Argentina for a fortnight, collecting a total box office revenue of $53,000. Number 4, Morbius. Yeah, I'm throwing this in as a horror movie. It has vampires. Cut me some slack. In Morbius, a release more meme than movie, Jared Leto stars as Dr. Michael Morbius, a scientist suffering from a rare degenerative blood disease who splices his genes with those of a vampire bat and, well, becomes something of a vampire himself. Morbius was doomed to fail from the beginning though, with many seeing the writing on the wall in terms of its quality. Considering the marketing campaign behind this one, the $39 million opening weekend in the US was tepid at best, against, say, Spider-Man No Way Home's $260 million opening weekend, and things only went downhill from there. Showings dwindled as cinemas globally began to minimize their daily screenings, and the majority had stopped showing it altogether by the end of the first month. In a weird twist though, riding in on a wave of memes, Sony opted to relaunch Morbius in 1,000 US cinemas a mere 2 months after its original release, but only made $300,000 on opening weekend, and it was pulled yet again within a week. So yeah, this one was so bad it was actually pulled twice. Number 3, Silent Night, Deadly Night. Silent Night, Deadly Night clawed its way to horror infamy on the back of the video nasty mania in the UK and a broader, more general lurch towards traditional conservatism in the Reagan era in the US. But regardless of those facts, the film itself only kinda has itself to blame when it comes to a poor critical and theatrical performance that saw it being pulled ahead of its time. As with all good Christmas stories, Silent Night, Deadly Night begins with an orphan raised by nuns, Billy, whose parents were sexually assaulted and murdered by a man in a Santa suit. Fast forward 10 years and Billy goes on a bloodthirsty Christmas Eve rampage that sees him don the hat and beard and lay waste to the neighborhood. Opening to a chorus of protests from the National PTA in the States, Silent Night's distributor, TriStar, attempted to piggyback on the controversy to sell more tickets, a strategy which absolutely backfired with severity. The film wasn't strong enough to break free from its controversy, which was purportedly making children frightened of Santa Claus, though what children were doing watching an R-rated horror flick is anyone's guess. Horror fans and critics alike decried its lack of substance or craft, and TriStar pulled it from cinemas less than a month after release. It is kind of a cult classic now though, so maybe its destiny was always on home video. Number 2, A Cure for Wellness. Back in 2016, psychiatric facility horror, A Cure for Wellness, for one brief moment, seemed like a promising new entry in that admittedly very niche subgenre. Unfortunately for star Dane DeHaan more than anyone else, whose talent has gone unsung thanks to the middling performance of all of his biggest blockbusters, the film tripped and stumbled straight out of the starting blocks and failed to make an impact with audiences worldwide. In the flick, DeHaan plays Lockhart, a stockbroker who travels to the Swiss Alps in the hope of retrieving his company's CEO from a mysterious wellness center. But the miraculous treatments are not what they seem, and Lockhart's sanity is questioned and tested as the facility's secrets and past are unraveled. Beneath this whole center lies a sinister plot in which the patients are actually cogs in the staff's machine, sacrificed in order to produce a lifespan-enhancing elixir. And as Gore Verbinski films go, A Cure for Wellness isn't actually all that bad, but audiences hated it, and after a dismal opening weekend in the box office, making just $4 million overall, it was pulled from 2,600 cinemas, representing the second greatest theater drop on record, behind that same year's Live by Night. Number 1, The Watcher in the Woods. Now, younger Disney viewers may not be familiar with The Watcher in the Woods. Hell, maybe even the older viewers might not be either. Here, Bette Davis led the cast for the House of Mouse's first proper foray into horror filmmaking, with development beginning in the late 70s as horror was gradually clawing an ever larger share of the mainstream. In the film, the modern all-American Curtis family move into a rural manor in England, and strange supernatural presences begin to make themselves felt. The ghost of the house's original owner's daughter torments the Curtis's daughter Jan, and seances and possessions on a $9 million budget follow. Unfortunately, Disney compromised The Watcher in the Woods before it was even across the editor's table, restricting the script and filmmaking so not to make the film too scary, remaining true to its family-friendly brand. Because yeah, when you make a horror film, what you want to do is make it not scary. I've heard that's what sells these films. Good lord, they should just make me an executive. Give me the money instead. I'll probably do a worse job, but I deserve it more. Anyway, the result of this, as you probably guessed, is a film that's tonally uneven, narratively obscure, and has a muddled, mildly catastrophic ending. The overwhelmingly negative response from critics and audiences caused Disney to pull the film from release after 10 days, and a variety of changes were made thereafter, including the filming of an entirely new ending, but even on a second release, The Watcher in the Woods failed to make back its production budget. Never mind turn a profit. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Did you see any of these movies in theaters, and are they better than their reputations may suggest? Let me know, and while you're down there, could you please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.